Okay, folks, the last video for the July period deals with a very simple question that somebody asked me, but I had to give some kind of thought to this. And what they've said is there anything in the VAT Act that says you must issue a tax invoice in sequence? Now, it seems like a simple question because the VAT Act is very clear that says every tax invoice must have a sequential number. But that's really all it says. So it says every tax invoice must have a sequential number, which means there must be a sequence. So first and foremost, the box we need to tick is, was there a sequence or is there a sequence? So my sequence starts with 1 and ends with 100. That's a sequence. But what stops me or prevents me from issuing invoice number 50 first? And if you look at the VAT Act, nothing stops you. You can issue 50 and then 51, and then you can issue number 1 and then number 100, in whatever sequence you want. But having said that, the challenge with this is that the request or the requirement is not a request, it's an absolute requirement for tax invoices to be sequentially numbered is a test of completeness. Now, the test of completeness is to make certain that, remember, if we go back one step, a tax invoice essentially has no other purpose whatsoever than to allow the recipient of that supply to claim an input tax deduction. There is no other purpose whatsoever. So essentially, a tax invoice is a cash check that somebody out there is out there and claiming input tax on and cashing checks against SARS. So on that basis, SARS wants to know exactly what's out there in the market. So they want to know if your sequence is 1 to 100 and none of those invoices have been issued or have been cashed in practice yet, how much is potentially there out there that they still are going to have to pay back to taxpayers. That is what the sequence is about, making certain completeness. So if SARS then comes to a taxpayer and tells them, I want all the tax invoices that you've issued, and that you get a list, and then there's all these gaps, then SARS will take the view saying, well, we accept that those gaps are invoices that you've issued which you haven't declared VAT on. So what we will do is we'll take the average of all the others, or we'll even take the highest of all the others, and we'll assume that that highest number applies to every number that's missing in the sequence you've given us. So if we then talk about a sequence, what you should be doing is you should be having a sequence, and next to it say, this is the sequence A to or 1 to 100, and these are the ones that we've issued. So if you then give to SARS and the date of the issuing, if you then give that list to SARS, it will be a list saying this is all the invoices we have available. These are the ones, and they're all in sequence. These are the ones that we've issued. Now, technically, that's the answer. We would never, ever advise doing that in practice, because all you're doing, you're setting yourselves up for serious pain and explaining this to SARS. Keeping in mind that the onus that sequence is complete and that the numbers not used do not represent an actual liability to SARS, which have not been declared to them, is squarely on the shoulders of the taxpayers. So that must be proved by the taxpayers. So probably if you want to talk about best practice, this is probably worst practice in terms of issuing tax invoices. But the question has been posed, and sometimes it's a good thing to go back to the source of that question and just ask the question, but what does the law say? In this case, the law is very clear. It says every tax invoice must have a sequential number, and it must be on the tax invoice. It doesn't say the total sequence of which that sequential number is a part must be issued in sequence. So that's interesting. Maybe if SARS gets wind of this kind of questions, they'll change the law saying that you must issue those documents in sequence. But as it stands at the moment, it isn't. So that's always just interesting to see how somebody asks a question. And I wouldn't be surprised if this question was asked from the perspective of somebody having been challenged by SARS on this. But be that as it may, that is the answer. That is what it is. And just that takes us a little bit closer, I guess, to getting a better understanding of this whole concept of tax documentation. We'll continue talking about tax documentation in future videos to make certain that we understand where tax documentation fits into the larger picture with regards to commercial documentation and the total documentation used in businesses. Now that's me, Christopher Theron, signing off for TradeTaxPlus. The next videos we'll be loading will be in August 2017. In the interim, please let us know what you think of it. We'll appreciate your inputs, and if there's something we need to change, we'll just change it. It's as simple as that. Let us know, otherwise we won't be able to know what we need to change. Have a wonderful day.